Now? I suppose so. It has to be an order, Colonel Graff. Armies don't move because a commander says, I suppose it's time to attack. I'm not a commander. I'm a teacher of little children. Colonel, sir, I admit I was on you. I admit I was a pain in the ass. But it worked. Everything worked just like you wanted it to. The last few weeks, Ender's even been happy. Content. He is doing well. His mind is keen, his play is excellent. Young as he is, we've never had a boy better prepared for command. Usually they go at 11, but at 9.5 he's top flight. Well, yes. For a few minutes there, it actually occurred to me to wonder what kind of man would heal a broken child of some of his hurt, just so he could throw him back into battle again. A little private moral dilemma. Please overlook it. I was tired. Saving the world, remember? Call him in. We're doing what must be done, Colonel Graff. Come on, Anderson. You're just dying to see how he handles all those rigged games I had you work out. That's a pretty low thing to... So I'm a low kind of guy. Come on, Major. We're both the scum of the earth. I'm dying to see how he handles them, too. After all, our lives depend on him doing real well. Nay? You're starting to use the boy's slang, are you? Call him in, Major. I'll dump the rosters into his files and give him his security system. What we're doing to him isn't all bad, you know. He gets his privacy again. Isolation, you mean. The loneliness of power. Go call him in. Yes, sir. I'll be back with him in 15 minutes. Goodbye. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I hope you had fun. I hope you had a nice time being happy, Ender. It might be the last time you get time in your life. Welcome, little boy. Your dear Uncle Graff has plans for you. Ender knew what was happening from the moment they brought him in. Everyone expected him to go to Commander early. Perhaps not this early, but he had topped the standings almost continuously for 3 years. No one else was remotely close to him, and his evening practices had become the most prestigious group in the school. There were some who wondered why the teachers had waited this long. He wondered which army they'd give him. 3 commanders were graduating soon, including Petra, but it was beyond hope for them to give him Phoenix Army. No one ever succeeded to command of the same army he was in when he was promoted. Anderson took him first to his new quarters. That sealed it. Only commanders had private quarters. Then he had him fitted for new uniforms and a new flash suit. He looked on the forms to discover the name of his army. Dragon, said the form. There was no dragon army. I've never heard of this dragon army, Ender said. That's because there hasn't been a dragon army in 4 years. We discontinued the name because there was a superstition about it. No dragon army in the history of the battle school ever won even a third of its games. It got to be a joke. Well, why are you reviving it now? We had a lot of extra uniforms to use up. Graff sat at his desk looking fatter and wearier than the last time Ender had seen him. He handed Ender his hook, the small box that allowed commanders to go where they wanted in the battle room during practices. Some said they worked magnetically, some said it was gravity. Many times during his evening practice sessions, Ender had wished that he had a hook instead of having to rebound off walls to get where he wanted to go. Now that he'd got quite deft at maneuvering without one, here it was. It only works, Anderson pointed out, during your regularly scheduled practice sessions. Since Ender already planned to have extra practices, it meant the hook would only be useful some of the time. It also explained why so many commanders never held extra practices. They depended on the hook, and it wouldn't do anything for them during the extra times. If they felt that the hook was their authority, their power over the other boys, then they were even less likely to work without it. That's an advantage I'll have over some of my enemies, Ender thought. Graff's official welcome speech sounded bored and over-rehearsed. Only at the end did he begin to sound interested in his own words. We're doing something unusual with Dragon Army. I hope you don't mind. We've assembled a new army by advancing the equivalent of an entire launch course early and delaying the graduation of quite a few advanced students. I think you'll be pleased with the quality of your soldiers. I hope you are, because we're forbidding you to transfer any of them. No trades? Asked Ender. It was how commanders always shored up their weak points, by trading around. None. You see, you've been conducting your extra practice sessions for 3 years now. You have a following. Many good soldiers would put unfair pressure on their commanders to trade them into your army. We've given you an army that can, in time, be competitive. We have no intention of letting you dominate unfairly. What if I got a soldier I just can't get along with? Get along with him. Graff closed his eyes. Anderson stood up, and the interview was over. Dragon was assigned the colors gray, orange, gray. Ender changed into his flash suit, then followed the ribbons of light until he came to the barracks that contained his army. They were already milling around near the entrance. Ender took charge at once. Bunking will be arranged by seniority. Veterans to the back of the room, newest soldiers to the front. It was the reverse of the usual pattern, and Ender knew it. He also knew that he didn't intend to be like many commanders, who never even saw the younger boys because they were always in the back. As they sorted themselves out according to their arrival dates, Ender walked up and down the aisle. Almost 30 of his soldiers were new, straight out of their launch group, completely inexperienced in battle. Some were even underage. The ones nearest the door were pathetically small. Ender reminded himself that that's how he must have looked to Bonzo Madrid when he first arrived. Still, Bonzo had only one underage soldier to cope with. Not one of the veterans belonged to Ender's elite practice group. Not one had ever been a toon leader. None, in fact, was older than Ender himself, which meant that even his veterans didn't have more than 18 months' experience. Some he didn't even recognize. They had made so little impression. They recognized Ender, of course, since he was the most celebrated soldier in the school. And some, Ender could see, resented him. At least they did me one favor. None of my soldiers is older than me. As soon as each soldier had a bunk, Ender ordered them to put on their flash suits and come to practice. We're on the morning schedule, straight to practice after breakfast. Officially, you have a free hour between breakfast and practice. We'll see what happens after I find out how good you are. After 3 minutes, many of them still weren't dressed. He ordered them out of the room. But I'm naked, said one boy. Dress faster next time. 3 minutes from the first call to running out the door. That's the rule this week. Next week the rule is 2 minutes. Move. It would soon be a joke in the rest of the school that Dragon Army was so dumb they had to practice getting dressed. 5 of the boys were completely naked, carrying their flash suits as they ran through the corridors. Few were fully dressed. They attracted a lot of attention as they passed open classroom doors. No one would be late again if he could help it. The corridors leading to the battle room, Ender made them run back and forth in the halls, as fast as they were sweating a little, while the naked ones got dressed. He led them to the upper door, the one that opened into the middle of the battle room, just like the doors in the actual games. Then he made them jump up and use the ceiling handholds to hurl themselves into the room. Assemble on the far wall, he said, as if you're going for the enemy's gate. They revealed themselves as they jumped, 4 at a time, through the door. Almost none knew how to establish a direct line to the target. When they reached the far wall, few of the new ones had any idea how to catch on or even control their rebounds. The last boy was a small kid, obviously underage. There was no way he was going to reach the ceiling handhold. You can use the side handhold if you want, Ender said. Go suck on it, said the boy. He took a flying leap, touched the ceiling handhold with a fingertip, hurtled through the door with no control at all, spinning in 3 directions at once. Ender tried to decide whether to like the little kid for refusing to take a concession or to be annoyed at his insubordinate attitude. They finally got themselves along the wall. Ender noticed that without exception they had lined up with their heads still in the direction that they had been up in the corridor. So Ender deliberately took hold of what they were treating as a floor and dangled from it upside down. Why are you upside down, soldier? He demanded. Some of them started to turn the other way. Attention! They held still. I said, why are you upside down? No one answered. They didn't know what he expected. I said, why does every one of you have his feet in the air and his head towards the ground? Finally, one of them spoke. Sir, this is the direction we were coming out of the door. Well, what difference is that supposed to make? What difference does it make what the gravity was back in the corridor? Are we going to fight in the corridor? Is there any gravity here? No, sir, no, sir! From now on, you forget about gravity before you go through the door. The old gravity is gone, erased. Understand me? Whatever your gravity is when you get to the door, remember, the enemy's gate is down. Your feet are toward the enemy gate. Up is toward your own gate. North is that way, south is that way, east is that way, west is that. What way? They pointed. That's what I expected. The only process you've mastered so far is the process of elimination, and the only reason you've mastered that is because you can do it in the toilet. What was the circus I saw out here? Did you call that forming up? Did you call that flying? Now, everybody, launch and form up on the ceiling. Right now. Move. As Ender expected, a good number of them instinctively launched not towards the wall with the door on it, but toward the wall that Ender had called north, the direction that had been up when they were in the corridor. Of course, they quickly realized their mistake, but too late. They had to wait to change things until they had rebounded off the north wall. In the meantime, Ender was mentally grouping them into slow learners and fast learners. The littlest kid, the one who had been last out of the door, was the first to arrive at the correct wall, and he called himself adroitly. Then they had been right to advance him. He'd do well. He was also cocky and rebellious, and probably resented the fact that he had been one of the ones Ender had sent naked through the corridors. You, Ender said, pointing at the small one. Which way is down? Toward the enemy door. The answer was quick. It was also surly, as if to say, okay, now get on with the important stuff. Name, kid? This soldier's name is Bean, sir. Get that for size or for brains? The other boys laughed a little. Well, Bean, you're right on to things. Now listen to me, because this matters. Nobody's going to get through that door without a good chance of getting hit. In the old days, you had 10, 20 seconds before you even had to move. Now, if you aren't already streaming out the door, when the enemy comes out, you're frozen. Now what happens when you're frozen? Can't move, one of the boys said. That's what frozen means, Ender said, but what happens to you? It was Bean, not intimidated at all, who answered intelligently. You keep going in the direction you started in, at the speed you were going when you were flashed. That's true. You 5 there on the end. Move. Startled, the boys looked at each other. Ender flashed them all. Next 5. Move. They moved. Ender flashed them too, but they kept moving, headed towards the walls. The first 5, though, were drifting uselessly near the main group. Look at these so-called soldiers, Ender said. Their commander ordered them to move, and now look at them. Not only are they frozen, they're frozen right here, where they can get in the way, while the other soldiers, because they moved when they were ordered, are frozen down there, plugging up the enemy lanes, blocking the enemy's vision. I imagine about 5 of you have understood the point of this, and no doubt Bean is one of them. Right, Bean? He didn't answer at first. Ender looked at him until he said, Right, sir. Then what is the point? When you are ordered to move, move fast, so that if you get iced, you'll bounce around instead of getting in the way of your own army's operations. Excellent. At least I have one soldier who can figure things out. Ender could see resentment growing in the way the other soldiers shifted their weight and glanced at each other, the way they avoided looking at Bean. Why am I doing this? What does this have to do with being a good commander, making one of the boys the target of all the others? Just because they did it to me, why should I do it to him? Ender wanted to undo his taunting of the boy, wanted to tell the others that the little one needed their help and friendship more than anyone else. But of course Ender couldn't do that. Not on the first day. On the first day, even his mistakes had to look like part of a brilliant plan. Ender hooked himself nearer the wall, and pulled one of the boys away from the others. Keep your body straight, towards the others. When the boy kept moving his body, Ender flashed him. The others laughed. How much of his body could you shoot? Ender asked a boy directly under the frozen soldier's feet. Mostly all I can hit is his feet. Ender turned to the boy next to him. What about you? I can see his body. And you? A boy farther down the wall answered. All of him. Feet aren't very big. Not much protection. Ender pushed the frozen soldier out of the way. Then he doubled his legs under his arms as if he were kneeling mid-air and flashed his own legs. Immediately the legs of his suit went rigid, holding them in that position. Ender twisted himself in the air so that he knelt above the other boys. What do you see? He asked. A lot less, they said. Ender thrust his gun between his legs. I can see fine, he said, and proceeded to flash the boys directly under him. Stop me, he shouted. Try and flash me. They finally did, but not until he had flashed more than a third of them. He thumbed his hook and thawed himself and every other frozen soldier. Now, he said, which way is the enemy's gate? Down. And what's our attack position? Some started to answer with words, but Bean answered by flipping himself away from the wall, with his legs doubled under him, straight towards the opposite wall, flashing between his legs all the way. For a moment, Ender wanted to shout at him, to punish him. Then he caught himself, rejecting the ungenerous impulse. Why should I be so angry at this little boy? Why should I be so angry? Mwah. Why should I be so angry at this little boy? Is Bean the only one who knows how? Ender shouted. Immediately, the entire army pushed off towards the opposite wall, kneeling in the air, firing between their legs, shouting at the top of their lungs. There may be a time, thought Ender, when this is exactly the strategy I'll need. 40 screaming boys and an unbalancing attack. When they were all at the other side, Ender called for them to attack him all at once. Yes, thought Ender, not bad. They gave me an untrained army with no excellent veterans, but at least it isn't a crop of fools. I can work with this. When they were assembled again, laughing and exhilarated, Ender began the real work. He had them freeze their legs in the kneeling position. Now, what are your legs good for in combat? Nothing, said some boys. Bean doesn't think so, said Ender. They're the best way to push off walls. Right, said Ender. The other boys started to complain that pushing off walls was movement, not combat. There is no combat without movement, Ender said. They fell silent and hated Bean a little more. Now, with your legs frozen like this, can you push off walls? No one dared answer, for fear they'd be wrong. Bean? Asked Ender. I've never tried it, but maybe if you faced a wall and doubled over at the waist. Right, but wrong. Watch me. My back's to the wall, legs are frozen. Since I'm kneeling, my feet are against the wall. Usually when you push off, you have to push downward, but you string out your body behind you like a string bean, right? Laughter. But with my legs frozen, I use pretty much the same force, pushing downward from the hips and thighs, only now it pushes my shoulders and my feet backwards